Looking at our x-intercept. X-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. This is our x-axis, so that would be our x-intercept. And this might be a number something like 5, 0. The y-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis, and this might be something like 0, 10. Notice for the x-intercept, the number is in the x space, and for the y-intercept, the number is in the y space, and then the other one is 0. So in order to graph these two things, what we need to do is we need to let our x be 0, and we need to let our y be 0. Well, if the x is 0, 3 times 0 equals 0, so that basically cancels out, and you have negative 2y equals 6. And if you divide those both by negative 2, 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. So the x was 0, and this whole thing became 0. Now if the y is 0, negative 2 times 0 is 0. And you end up with 3x equals 6. And when you divide both sides by 3, your x equals 2. So this is our y-intercept, 0, negative 3. This is our x-intercept, 2, 0. And then you can connect the dots, and your line looks like that. Example B, we have to let x be 0. If x is 0, and we cover that up because it cancels out, excuse me, you have 2y equals 4. Excuse me. And when you divide both sides by 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then if we let our y be 0, this thing cancels, and you have negative x equals 4, and dividing both sides by a negative 1, 4 divided by negative 1 is negative 4. So we have the ordered pair 0, 2, negative 4, 0, and your line looks something like that. Looks just like that. Letter C, if we let x be 0, 6 times 0 is 0, so that's gone. And you have negative 4y equals 12, and it's a negative because of that subtract there. When you divide both sides by negative 4, 12 divided by negative 4 is negative 3. If we let y be 0, that's our second number, 4 times 0 is 0, so that cancels out. And you have 6x equals 12. Dividing both sides by 6, x then equals 2. So we have 0, negative 3, and then 2, 0, and your line goes like that. Letter D, if x is 0, and that gets covered up, you have negative y equals 8. Dividing both sides by negative 1, y then equals negative 8. Might be off our graph a little bit. And if y equals 0, and we covered that up, you have 4x equals 8. Dividing both sides by 4, x equals 2. When you graph that, you are off the chart a little bit. We'll put 0, -8 down here, 2, 0 right here, and then the line looks like that. Couple more of these. If x is 0, and you might start to notice a pattern with these. If x is 0 and you cover that up, you don't necessarily have to write out the 3y equals 12. You can just do 12 divided by 3, which is 4. And if your second number is 0, you can cover that up. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So you don't necessarily have to write these out. Some of you might get to the point where you don't have to. So we have 0, 4, 3, 0, and the line looks like that. Letter F, if x is 0, you have -2y equals 6. 6 divided by -2, and you might be able to do it right here. 6 divided by -2 is -3. And if y is 0, you just have x equals 6. So your ordered pairs are 0, -3, and 6, 0. Example G, if x is 0, we cover that one up. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And if y is 0, 9 divided by -1 is -9. And again, that one's going to be a little bit off the graph. -9, 0 would be over there. Letter H, if x is 0, you have 4y equals 10. 10 divided by 4 is 2.5 or 2.5. And if your y is 0, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 0, 2.5, 5, 0, and your line goes through there. In-class practice, if you want more practice, you can do those. I'm going to skip over those right now. Next we go to 3-5, which is the slope of a line. Positive slope rises as you go from left to right. Negative slope falls or goes down. 0 slope goes horizontal. And undefined slope is a vertical line straight up and down. 0 and undefined are different. 0 means there's no change as you go left to right, and undefined, basically that number is so steep, the line is so steep that there is no slope for it. This is our slope formula, y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1, and sometimes I just like to do y minus y over x minus x. And I do that so the subscripts don't confuse us. Doesn't matter which y you start with. Whichever y you start with, you have to start with the same x. So I'm going to start with this one. 5 minus 2, 3 minus 1. 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. So your slope is 3/2. Letter B, 1 minus -4, -2 minus 5. I think I should be careful of these negatives right here. Change that subtracting a negative to adding the opposite, and that becomes 5. -2 plus a -5. You owe me $2, you borrow 5 more, is a -7. And it doesn't matter if the negative is on the top, the bottom, or right out in front. Those all mean the same thing. Letter C, 4 minus 4, 3 minus negative 2. 4 minus 4 is 0. When you subtract a negative, that becomes 5. 0 divided by 5 is a slope of 0. Letter D, 8 minus 1 over 6 minus 6. 8 minus 1 is 7. 6 minus 6 is 0. And if you enter that on a calculator, 7 divided by 0, you'll end up with an error, and that means this is a vertical line and your slope is undefined. And when I'm finding slope, I kind of naturally just start with the bigger number. See how I did 5 minus 2? This time the 1 was the bigger number, so I did the 1 subtract the negative 4. Here they were equal, so it didn't matter. And here I did the 8 minus 1. If you pick the biggest number to start with, then you don't have as many negatives. Letter E, 5 minus negative 2, negative 2 minus 8. Change that, subtracting a negative to adding, and that becomes 7. Negative 2 plus a negative 8 is 7 over negative 10, which is the same as negative 7 over 10, or you can have the negative out in front. They all mean the same thing. And letter F, 4 minus a negative 2, 3 minus a negative 1. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding. And 6 over 4, those can be both be divided by 2, and so you end up with 3 halves. Example 2, we're asked to graph the following lines, and we're going to start with our y-intercept. This is our y-axis, so our y-intercept is 1. Our slope means rise over right. That's right up here at the top. So that means we're going to go up 3 and 2 to the right. So from here you go up 3 and 2 to the right. And that's what your line looks like. Letter B, our y-intercept is negative 4. It's always on that y line, up and down. Our slope is 2. And you might want to write that 2 as 2 over 1. Rise over right, so you go up 2 and 1 to the right. Letter C, our y-intercept is 2. Slope is negative 1/3. That means you go down 1 and 3 to the right. So down 1 and 3 to the right. Letter D, y-intercept is a negative 1. Slope is 1/4, up 1 and 4 to the right. And graph your line. Letter E, your y-intercept is negative 4. Slope is 5. You might want to write that as 5 over 1. You go up 5 and 1 to the right, and your line is right there. Letter F, this is a typo. It should just be negative 2. So your y-intercept is negative 2. Slope is 3. You might want to write that 3 over 1. And that goes up 3 and 1 to the right. And your line looks like that. Letter G, your y-intercept is -3. So that's on your y-axis. Slope is 3/5. Up 3 and 1 to the right. I'm sorry, up 3 and 5 to the right. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And your line looks like that. Letter H, your y-intercept is 3. Slope is -2/5. So that means you go down 2 and 3 to the right. Down 2 and 5 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then your line looks like that. In class practice, you can do if you want to. I'm going to skip over it from right now. We have slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And this is one of the things that you do need to know. You will use this a lot. M is your slope and b is your y-intercept. And these look exactly like the ones we just graphed on the previous page. So we're going to write the equation of this line first. The slope goes in front of the x, and your y-intercept is 1. And when the equation is in this form, we can graph them like we just did. Y-intercept is 1. Slope is 3/2. So you go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and 2 to the right. And then your line is right there. Letter B, slope y-intercept. You're putting that into y equals mx plus b form. So that becomes y equals 2x minus 5. Your y-intercept is the -5. And if you want to write the slope as 2 over 1, go up 2 and 1 to the right. Letter C, we have to put those numbers into y equals mx plus b. So that becomes -1/3 x plus 8. We're a little bit off the charts right here. 8 is right there. Slope is -1/3. So you go down 1 and 3 to the right. Letter D, slope is -5, y-intercept is 0. So we want to put those numbers into y equals mx plus b. So that becomes y equals -5x plus 0. Technically, that is the same as y equals -5x. So our y-intercept is 0, and from there you go down 5 and 1 to the right. Letter E, we're kind of opposite of letter D, putting this into y equals mx plus b. That would be y equals 0x plus 5, or just y equals 5. This crosses y-intercept of 5, and the slope, it doesn't go up or down at all. So that would be y equals 5. And a slope that is undefined, The equation of that line will be x equals something, and x equals 2 would be this line that goes straight up and down. And you'll notice it doesn't touch the y-axis. Couple more at the top of the next page. Writing this in y equals mx plus b form, that will be y equals negative 4x plus 2.5. So 2.5 is right there. And then you go down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 to the right. And then your line looks like that. Excuse me. Letter H, y equals mx plus b, would be y equals negative 3x minus 7. This is our y-intercept, so we're out off the chart, negative 7. And then from there you go down 3, 1 to the right. So we're actually going further off the chart. Example 2, what we want to do is put these in slope-intercept form. So what we need to do is we need to solve for y. Here you will add 2x to both sides, and that becomes y equals 2x minus 4. Here's our y-intercept, negative 4. Our slope is 2, so you go up 2 and 1 to the right. Letter B, we're trying to get the y by itself. So you are subtracting 3x from both sides. And when you do that, be careful here, it becomes negative 2y equals negative 3x plus 6. Lots of negatives here, be careful with those. Dividing everything by negative 2, you have y equals 3 halves x minus 3. Your y-intercept is negative 3. And from there you go up 3 and 2 to the right. Letter C, we're trying to solve for y. First thing I'm going to do is subtract 4x from both sides. And that becomes negative 8y equals negative 4x plus 8. And then divide everything by negative 8. And you have y equals 1/2 x minus 1. And I took that 4/8 and I reduced it to 1/2. 8 divided by negative 8 is a negative 1. So our y-intercept is a negative 1. Slope is 1/2, so up 1 and 2 to the right. Letter D, you will subtract 5x from both sides, and you have 10y equals negative 5x minus 20. From there you divide everything by 10, and that becomes 5 over 10 is 1/2. Negative 20 divided by 10 is a negative 2. And I forgot the x in there. Y-intercept is negative 2, and then our slope is down 1 and 2 to the right. We have 4 more of these. Subtracting 3x from both sides. Careful, you have a negative y equals negative 3x plus 6. we're going to change everything to the opposite. So that will become y equals 3x minus 6. Here's your minus 6. From there you go up 3 and 1 to the right. And your line looks like that. Letter F, when you add 4x to both sides, you have 2y equals 4x plus 8. Dividing both sides by 2, you have y equals 2x plus 4. Your y-intercept is 4. And then you go up 2 and 1 to the right. Letter G, you would subtract 6x from both sides, and you have 10y equals negative 6x minus 30. From there, you divide everything by 10, and I'm going to reduce and simplify. Negative 6 over 10 is a negative 3/5 x. Negative 30 divided by 10 is a negative 3. Negative 3, right there. Slope is negative 3/5, so you go down 3 and 5 to the right. And your line looks like that. And letter H, you subtract 4x from both sides, and that becomes negative 10y equals negative 4x plus 20. Dividing everything by negative 10, you will have y equals 2/5 x minus 2. And again, I simplified those. So your negative 2 is right here, and then your slope is up 2 and 5 to the right. We have a second form of a line, which is called point slope form. And sometimes I like this one better because you don't have to solve for y. All you have to do is substitute the numbers in. The m is still your slope, and then the point is right here. And notice how these are subtractions, so whatever number you are given will be the opposite. So this will be your m, this is your x, and this is your y. Substituting in then, you're substituting into y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. All you have to do is put those three numbers in. Y minus 3 equals negative 2 times x plus 4. And notice this was a positive 3, so we did a negative. That was a negative 4, so we did a positive. And that's your answer right there. Letter B, again, substituting into y equals mx plus b. I'm sorry, y minus y equals m times x minus x. And this is called point slope form because this is your point and this is your slope. So this becomes y plus 5 equals negative 1/2 x minus 2. This was a negative 5, so it becomes a positive. That was a positive 2, so it becomes a negative. Letter C, we're substituting into y minus y equals m times x minus x. So that becomes y minus 3 equals 7 times x minus 4. Again, this is called point slope form because this is your point and this is your slope. Letter D, substituting into y minus y equals m times x minus x. That becomes y plus 5 equals 1/3 x plus 3. Couple more examples here. That will become y minus 5 equals 0 times x minus 2. Whenever you have undefined, undefined means that your x is always going to be the same, and that will be the line x equals 3. And this one, if we simplified it out, since the slope is 0, the slope of a line with the equation of a line with 0 slope is always y equals. So if the line is horizontal, it is always y equals, and if the line is vertical, it is always x equals. And G and H, this would be y plus 4 equals 2 times x minus 3. And this one would be y minus 8 equals negative 3/5 x plus 6. Next thing, we are adding one step. We have 2 points here. So the first thing we want to do is find the slope. Then we start with point slope form. And you'll notice they wanted it in slope intercept form. So to get it in slope intercept form, we solve for y. So we start out getting the slope, put it into point slope form, and then solve for y. Our slope was y minus y1 over x minus x1. So this will be 3 minus negative 1 over negative 3 minus 3. So that will become 4 over negative 6, which is negative 2/3. Doesn't matter which point you use. You're going to start with point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm going to pick this one, no particular reason why. Y minus 3 equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. Remember how you do the opposites? This was your x. It's a negative, so it becomes a positive. Here it's a positive, so it becomes a negative. Now we need to solve for y. And to do that, you're always going to do it the same way. You're going to distribute negative 2/3 times x is negative 2/3 x. And negative 2/3 times 3 will be a negative 2. Our goal is to get the y by itself, so we will add 3 to both sides, and that becomes negative 2/3 x plus 1. Remember, the first one's always the worst, so if that one didn't make a lot of sense, we've got a couple more. First thing, we find the slope. 9 minus 0, negative 1 minus 2. That becomes 9 over negative 3. So our slope is negative 3. We can take either of those points. I'm going to pick the first one, and that would be y minus 9 equals negative 3 times x plus 1. That is point slope form because we're given a point and a slope. Distributing, you have y minus 9 equals negative 3x minus 3. Adding 9 to both sides, you have y equals negative 3x plus 6. Number 6, 11 minus a negative 6 over 6 minus a negative 2. That becomes 16 over 8, which is 2. Doesn't matter which point you pick. I'm going to pick the second one. Y plus 6 equals 2 times x plus 2. Remember, the opposite of that goes in. The opposite of that goes in. And as you distribute, that becomes y plus 6 equals 2x plus 4. And subtracting 6 from both sides, you have y equals 2x minus 2. Letter D, find the slope. 8 minus negative 3 over negative 1 minus a negative 1. So that would be 11 over 0, which is undefined slope. And if you look at the top of the page, we have another example that had an undefined slope. See how your x's are the same here? The equation of your line is x equals negative 1. And that one's kind of a special case. Letter G, negative 3 minus a negative 4, negative 1 minus 0. And negative 3 plus 4 is a 1. Negative 1 minus 0 is a negative 1. So your slope is negative 1. And I'm going to pick the second number. Y plus 4 equals negative 1 times x minus 0. When you distribute, that becomes y plus 4 equals negative x. And when you subtract 4 from both sides, you have y equals negative x minus 4. Letter H, finding the slope. 4 minus a negative 6, 2 minus a negative 2. That becomes 10 over 4. And 10 over 4 is 2.5. I'm going to pick these numbers here. No particular reason why. Y plus 6 equals 2.5 x plus 2. And when you distribute, you have y plus 6 equals 2.5x plus 5. And then when you subtract 6 from both sides, you have y equals 2.5x minus 1. Letter I, 6 minus 6 over 4 minus a negative 3 becomes 0 over 7. 0 is a horizontal line, and you see how those are both the same. Those are your y coordinates, so that will be y equals 6. Letter J, 3 minus negative 6 minus 2, subtract a negative 2, becomes 9 over 0, which is undefined. It's undefined. We know it is straight up and down. And you'll see those x's are the same. So the equation of that line is x equals negative 2. And as you're working on your homework, you might want to write these things out. Slope is y minus y1 over x minus x1. Slope intercept form is y equals mx plus b, and point slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And you might want to write those down. Those three things might help you out. In class practice, and that brings us to the end. If you, as you're working on your homework, you can actually go online and print out some graph paper. So if that helps you and you want the graph paper, you can just go online and print that out.